It is 2 in the morning somewhere in the Arizona desert. A truck stop sits off the interstate, floodlit and hot, the asphalt still throwing off heat from a day that touched 104 degrees. 40, maybe 50 semi-trucks sit dark and motionless in long rows, curtains drawn, no hum from the engines, no rattle of AC units on the rooftops, just silence and heat and the faint creak of metal cooling in the night air. The obvious conclusion is immediate. Those drivers must be suffering. Or they are running their engines quietly with the windows cracked, burning diesel all night just to breathe. But neither of those things is true. What is actually happening inside those dark cabs is the result of a regulatory war, a series of preventable deaths, and an engineering solution that most people have driven past 100 times without ever knowing what it was. Start with the instinct that almost everyone shares. A truck engine idles, the air conditioning runs, the driver sleeps cool. Simple, obvious, except a long-haul diesel engine burning at idle consumes somewhere between 0.8 and a full gallon of fuel every single hour. Over a driving year, that adds up to somewhere between $3,000 and $5,000 per driver, just in overnight fuel. That is before accounting for the engine wear that comes from running a massive diesel power plant at low load for 8 hours a night, which mechanics will tell you is one of the worst things you can do to a motor designed to work hard. And then comes the part that changes everything. In a growing number of states, long-haul idling is illegal. Fines, warnings, inspections. The obvious solution that every outsider assumes is the answer is actually prohibited in a large portion of the country. So the industry had to build something else entirely. Modern sleeper cabs are not just big seats bolted behind the cab, they are thermally engineered compartments. Multi-layer insulation in the walls and ceiling, roof vents designed to create passive airflow, blackout curtains that cut solar heat gain by roughly 30%, reflective surfaces on the exterior. A surprising amount of thermal engineering baked into what looks like a simple sleeping space. But passive design only carries so far. Above 90 degrees, insulation alone stops being enough. The heat finds a way in. The mattress holds warmth. The metal frame conducts. This is where the hidden layer begins. The solution the industry landed on is one of those answers that sounds like a joke until you understand it. The fix for the engine idling problem is a second engine, not the main drivetrain engine. Something much smaller called an auxiliary power unit, an APU. It runs only the sleeper climate system, a small amount of electrical load, maybe a phone charger and a light. Nothing else. And because it is small, purpose-built, and working at the right load for its size, it burns somewhere between 2.4 gallons per hour instead of a full gallon. Running a second engine saves 60 to 75% of the fuel. It also produces dramatically fewer emissions and leaves the main engine untouched and cold. The solution to the idling problem is a smaller, smarter version of the same problem. Scale that up across the industry and it becomes something else. There are roughly 3.5 million commercial truck drivers working in the United States. If even a fraction of them idled a main engine through a summer night instead of using an APU or an alternative, the aggregate fuel waste and emissions output becomes a national air quality problem. This is not hypothetical. The EPA did the analysis. It is why federal SmartWay certification exists. It is why state idle reduction laws spread aggressively through the 2000s. The sleeper cab heat problem did not stay a trucking problem. It became an environmental policy problem at scale. But even the APU is not the strangest part of this system. At major truck stops, there is something else sitting in plain sight that almost no one recognizes. Those short orange or yellow pedestals scattered across the parking rows at Flying J, Pilot, and Love's locations. Most people who have ever pulled into one of those lots have walked past them without a second thought. Those are truck stop electrification stations. A driver pulls in, connects a power cable from the sleeper cab to the pedestal, and runs the climate system entirely off-grid power. No engine, no APU, no diesel at all. The cost is typically somewhere between $1.50 and $2 an hour, which often runs cheaper than APU diesel. The same pedestal frequently delivers television, internet, and phone charging through the same connection. It is a hotel room outlet at highway scale for a vehicle the size of a house. Here is where the behavioral piece lands. Experienced drivers do something when they pull into a stop that looks wasteful to anyone watching. They run the main AC at full blast for 15 to 20 minutes before they shut everything down. Someone unfamiliar with the system would call that pointless. The truck is stopping. The engine is about to go off. Why are they burning fuel to cool a space they are about to stop cooling? The answer is thermal mass. The mattress, the curtains, the insulated walls, the ceiling panels, all of it absorbs cold the way a cast iron pan absorbs heat. Charge that mass with 20 minutes of hard cooling and the cab stays livable for 2 to 3 hours after shutdown, even in triple-digit ambient temperature. Add a small battery-powered bunk fan to move air across the driver and a properly charged thermal system, and a driver can complete a legal rest break in a 100-degree parking lot without running any engine at all. The waste is the strategy. None of this appeared because the industry decided to innovate. It appeared because people died. Between 2001 and 2003, a cluster of documented cases emerged out of the desert Southwest. Drivers found dead or in critical condition in parked cabs with no APU, no shore power, in states that had already begun restricting idling. OSHA and the National Institute for Occupational Safety and Health both investigated. The findings were not complicated. A driver trapped between an idling fine and a 110-degree cab had no good options. Those deaths forced federal attention. The TEA 21 Highway Reauthorization directed the first significant funding toward idle reduction technology and truck stop electrification infrastructure. The climate system that now sits quietly in a modern sleeper cab exists because regulators had documented proof that the absence of it was killing people. Evidence was always visible. The white and silver cab colors on major fleet trucks are not accidents or cost decisions. They are thermal specifications. A dark cab in direct sun absorbs meaningfully more heat through the metal than a light one. The roof vent and fan combination is not just for fresh air. It creates a chimney effect, drawing hot air up and out even without electrical power. The bunk position in many sleeper designs, sitting above the drive axle rather than over the front of the cab, puts the sleeping space over one of the most insulated sections of the vehicle. These are engineering decisions. They were just never explained. The honest version of the story includes the gaps. APUs weigh between 400 and 800 pounds, which reduces legal payload on every run. In extreme heat, above 115 degrees, even a well-maintained APU system struggles to keep a small metal cab genuinely cool through an 8-hour rest. Drivers in the deep desert Southwest still report brutal nights. Battery electric APUs are growing in availability but remain expensive to retrofit and limited in runtime. Truck stop electrification infrastructure is dense along major interstate corridors and almost non-existent at rural rest areas, way stations, and independent fuel stops. And none of this applies to day cab drivers who have no sleeper compartment at all and almost no engineered solution available when they are required by law to take a rest break in summer heat. That part of the problem has no clean answer yet. Those dark, silent rows of cabs in a desert truck stop are not filled with suffering drivers or idling engines burning fuel invisibly into the night. They are filled with a system: thermally charged insulation, purpose-built secondary engines, grid-connected pedestals, pre-cooled mattresses, and decisions made under regulatory pressure after real consequences. Every curtain, every roof vent, every orange pedestal, every idling fine connects back to the same physical constraint. A human being needs several hours of sleep inside a metal box in a parking lot in July. The industry built an invisible infrastructure to make that survivable. Almost no one who has ever driven past a truck stop has known that was what they were looking at. If keeping a driver comfortable inside the cab is that complicated, it raises the obvious next question: what about the cargo directly behind them? A refrigerated trailer running through the same desert heat is operating a completely different kind of climate system under completely different stakes. And what actually happens when that system fails mid-route and the temperature inside a sealed trailer begins to climb is a different story entirely, one with a very specific and very unforgiving deadline.